We are live. Welcome to the Carl Vibe Show. This is my first ever live stream, bringing on a guest and talking about some fascinating topics. Today I've got Augustus Britton today, and he is a very fascinating individual. He's a talented writer and artist, a modern day yogi and philosopher with incredible views on life, meditation, and the true nature of reality. And he's published several books on all of those profound topics. I wanted to show some of those to you guys really quick. For those of you that are watching, first of all, he has a fast growing newsletter called Reality Now, where he showcases a lot of his different philosophies on life and meditative experiences and secrets and how he gets along in the world today in a modern technological society and dealing with all of its complications. If you're interested in that newsletter, please go follow the link down in the description and subscribe to that. I would say it's well worth it. He's also published several books. First and foremost, one of the main ones that I've noticed, I've got this one coming in the mail today, A Life Worth Dying For, that he wrote with his brother, Eben Britton. And it's very fascinating. I wanted to read this to you guys really quick, where it says, "Are you living a life worth dying for? Beautiful. What does this mean? A life worth dying for?" And he goes on. And then Augustus's comments here. It's interesting to me because the way you're saying it feels like a more physical perspective. I was thinking of it in a metaphysical perspective in terms of whether or not you are living a life worth dying for. So very fascinating input on not just living a life worth living, but also one that you're prepared to die for and that's worth dying for. He's also published other books, How to Kill a White Man, Words on Awakening, and Generation Ass. Very fascinating philosophies. If you want to check those out, go snag those over on Amazon. As soon as you can get your hands on them, I highly recommend it. And without further ado, I want to welcome Augustus Britton to the show. Welcome, my friend. It's glad to finally have you on here and to pick your brain and get your ideas on life. Before we get going, I wanted to mention and bring up my condolences to you and your family. I know that your grandfather, Walter Smith Britton, passed away this last week. And I know that my heart goes out to you and your family in this time, and want to dedicate this show to him and those. My father passed away from dementia just a couple of years ago, and invoke their presence and mentorship as we go into this conversation today. So Augustus, how are you doing, my friend?
Wow, beautiful. I'm great, man. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for having me on this inaugural episode. And death is certainly part of this whole game. So, whether it's a celebration or I don't know, it's interesting, not that this is necessarily if it's something we want to talk about, but
yeah.
Death in America is, it feels like it's been put in this category where the only thing, or the only quote unquote reasonable reaction, is to mourn as opposed to celebrate. To celebrate, coming from a yogic perspective,
yeah,
death is okay. Death is part of it, right? So
right.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all more information as to how I want to move forward. And, that's a blessing to be able to live in that reality. I don't think a lot of people live in that reality. People could be hearing that and say, what are you talking about? Death is the worst thing ever. But, so that's just a side note. But thank you.
No, definitely not a side note. I think the death of my father, he died of dementia. And one of the difficult things for me was realizing like the nature of his consciousness and perception of reality kind of slipped and was gone into another realm, maybe even a year and a half before he physically died. Mm-hmm. And not only was that horrifying for me, but it also made me kind of face the fact that when I die, if my consciousness persists after death, after the physical body drops, how do I move about? How do I control that experience? Or how do I know where I am? Sort of like finding yourself in a dream or a spiritual realm or other dimension. If you don't have a physical body or eyes or ears, and you're sort of a spirit or ghost or whatever you believe, it's kind of a mystery and unknown. And the closest you can come, I think, in this life to understanding that and becoming lucid to that experience and being able to experience life after in a better way is kind of comes in your conscious control and your lucid ability to meditate. And if you're moving around at the speed of thought and emotions, and you're a mental and emotional wreck, or haven't paid attention to yourself with mindfulness, that can be a difficult thing. And I think experiencing deep and profound meditation is sort of a form of practicing that and preparing for that. Would you agree with that?
Oh, certainly. You know, it's interesting. Somebody yesterday, actually, just yesterday, I was talking to one of my meditation teachers, and he said, the enlightened person died for you. The enlightened person died for you. And what I took from that is, are these, these are people.
Yeah, I'm just featuring some comments down below. If we,
I wasn't sure I was. But meditation, I don't know. Could we say, could we say yoga is a preparation for death? Yoga, the definition of yoga is union, right? So we're doing our yogic practice. And this is another thing in America, which is good. This is all good, because more information, the better. And I don't think anybody should be expected to be fully aware of, let's say something like yoga from the get-go. But in America, when we say yoga, we think of hatha yoga. Hatha is the postural yoga. So you're just going into a studio and doing sun salutations and triangle pose, which is great. And that's every one of those postures is essentially a handshake with God, but there's deeper dimensions of yoga. So are we practicing yoga or meditation? So one of the aspects of that practice is so that we're more comfortable with whatever comes next. Because I mean, a big aspect of the yoga science, let's say, you could say science or philosophy or practice, is that when we die, we don't come back again. We've released all of the karmic baggage through our sadhana, our daily yogic practice, that we don't get reincarnated.
Right.
Now, whatever that realm looks like after we die, if we don't get back on the wheel of life, the next reincarnation, I don't know what that looks like exactly. Anybody's guess is as good as anybody else's. And I suppose, there are yogis, of course, and mystics, and not just yogis, but that have had mystical experiences, that have seen the afterlife, I would imagine. And, people have written about that. So it's interesting. But, what is meditation to you, Carl? I mean, and I'll just say, for me, very simply, it's getting to the truth of the matter. It's getting to the silence of the matter. It's our natural way. It's our natural vibration. So, and life can distract us from that very often.
Definitely.
So,
yeah, I think there's a paradox there where we live in this universe of the all, and the all is this vibrational experience that's both phenomenal and physical at the same time. And we find ourselves seemingly in these bodies. And from the minute that you're born, you're given a name and you're taught a language, and this entire construct sort of puts you in a societal box or a maze or a labyrinth that you're spend the rest of your life usually defending. And this story plays on in your mind in English or in that language that you were taught, and everything has a label, so that when even any experience goes by in your life, even if you see a bird fly by, there's this commentary that says, oh, there's a bird inside your mind. And that sort of cuts you off from that actual eternal vibrational essence or presence that actually exists behind that feeling like an individual. And I think for me, meditation sort of peels back those layers like an onion, and you step out of that maze of the mind or that labyrinth, and you go back to the void or to the space in between all of the everything that seemingly matters. And that's what boggles my mind, is that when you think about the universe, we always think about the physical things in the universe and everything that we've identified and named. And meditation sort of puts me in the center of that, or the space in between all of that, and allows me to become the witness or the observer of all of it instead of caught up in that story. And for me, the yoga is a good example of that. So when you're doing a particular, like a physical, like the exercise of yoga or hot yoga, you just get in a plank position and you realize that you can stay in the presence of now. And even when you clear your thoughts, there's constant change and an urge moving forward and a growth happening that you're hanging on to. And meditation can kind of help you become a witness of that, or experience things outside of that physical reality, and help you prepare for death or the afterlife, or witness your problems rather than get sucked into it. Like getting drowned in the ocean, suddenly you have gills and can sit and breathe, and sit in that turmoil and know who you are. So that brings up a good point. It's like when you approach meditation, Augustus, what do you typically do? What is your method to approach meditation? Because for me, it's ongoing throughout the day, and then I have moments where I really realize I'm sort of lost in the day or the problems, or ruminating in my mind, and then I'll intentionally get all my mystical things out and I'll burn incense and go and actually do a meditative practice. But I wanted to ask you, like, what is your approach to meditation, or your what you're passionate about there?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say something about the label thing you brought up, which has been coming up for me. You know, I feel like labels and, let's say, linguistic identifications are purely man-made. You know, that's purely human consciousness made. And, you know, if we look in nature, as far as I know, nature as in animals, trees, whatever it may be, unless we get to a point where we start communicating with them directly and we know, you know, what they're thinking. As far as I know, no animals or trees look at something else and label it something. I mean, it's purely, nature is a purely non-dual existence. Nature is a purely, you're me, I'm you, we're coexisting. Humans, when, you know, whatever the original psychologists were, the creators of different language, however far back that goes, you know, these labels have been created, and they kind of push us with each label and with each, and I say linguistic identification because, like, if I look at my dog is identifying things all the time. She's looking at the person at the gate, making some sort of connection, but she's not saying something out loud. You know, like, for instance, if I say I have anxiety, well, what does that mean? Or if I say I'm depressed, well, what does that mean? Like, in my true nature, none of that really exists. None of that exists in the natural world. The tree doesn't look at the grass and say, oh, that's grass, I'm an oak tree. You know, so I just feel like that's a really interesting point, and something that I think is worth disentangling within culture and within human consciousness. The amount of labels and linguistic identification that we have put upon ourselves, and we can see the symptoms and the ramifications of this in our world today, how disconnected we are from each other, because every new label creates less community to me.
Right.
It's good to, I feel like it's good because I don't know. I don't know if it's really good at all. So I don't know if you want to talk about anything about that. But I mean, for me, meditation, I'm with you with it, where I need to be in a meditative state all day, so to speak. I'm walking around consistently checking in,
Definitely.
consistently breathing a certain way. I could say I have a bit, like, my sort of traditional meditation practice would be sitting cross-legged and repeating a mantra. That's kind of my, like, if you want to say, okay, he's meditating right now. That's what I do, create a space, have my cushion where I sit, invoke my mantra with my eyes closed, and just purely listening and just following my breath. But other than that, I agree with you. It's an ongoing practice throughout the day as we go on. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we live in a society where you go get in your car to go anywhere, and the side of the road is cluttered with billboards, and your subconscious is constantly attaching to those and autonomously reading the billboards and filling your mind with that conversation. We have the radio on, listening to music and lyrics, and those songs get stuck in a loop in our head. And then you go somewhere into the store and it's full of advertising and marketing and labels. And one of the things that occurred to me was the experience of just trying to release from all of that in a meditative sense. So as I'm going through the day, I see all those things. And as soon as I notice that I'm just on that hamster wheel again inside my mind, analyzing everything with this analytical overlay that society puts in there, that it was resulting in me not having any peace and calm within myself and constantly feeling bombarded. And then trying to let go of all that and walking through the store and walking through life, and not just attaching names and labels onto everything, is really placing everything in from a point of view that has judgment upon it, where you're classifying everything and categorizing it into different classes and putting it all into different boxes, including your sense of self and who you are and what you think. And if that conversation inside your mind is full of labels that can become negative or not positive in your life, then you can get on a bad loop and get going down a negative path before you can step aside from that. And I totally agree with you, is that the labeling and naming everything was one of the first things that I discovered in letting go of that. And I like that you mentioned the non-dual aspect. I personally gravitated into the Advaita teachings and the non-dualistic types teachings of like Ramana Maharshi and some of these individuals, where you kind of ask yourself that sense of separation that you feel like you have in reality when you meditate. For me, when I go deep with it, can fall away, where when you look up at the stars or look up at the clouds, you kind of realize that, where does the seeing happen? Is it happening inside just me? Is it happening between me and the clouds? Or if without the sunlight shining from clear out in intergalactic space across the solar system, I wouldn't even see the cloud. And so this experience of seeing and experiencing life and the sense of self is, you are that experience, and everything that you're witnessing is you, and you're it. And you have these teachings like from the Kabbalion that also reflect that, the all is in all, and you are it, and it's all interconnected with your consciousness. If you're not there witnessing it and experiencing it, then it's not happening for you, and your life will only ever be what you're noticing and what you're paying attention to. And a lot of times it just gets so narrowed down into just that silver dollar side space in front of you that feels it in focus, and the rest is all blurry, and we're just convinced that we know it, and this is me, and I'm here. And meditation can help you peel that back. And we've got a couple of really good questions here. Like Ratherby Squidding says, I know that there's so many benefits to meditation, but it's something I have trouble making time for and prioritizing. Do either of you stick to a meditation schedule? I know you kind of mentioned already that meditation is kind of a daily practice throughout the day. And it is for me too, a constant. From the minute I wake up, my mind starts to go and say, oh, I got all this stuff to do. And I immediately have to catch that, like grabbing the reins on the horse and pull that back and begin the meditative practice. And then I'll find a spot outside or in my room or my office, and I'm surround myself with things that promote the meditative cues and mindfulness. And I wear the chakra necklaces and burn incense. And I kind of surround myself in an entire environment and friends that discuss the topic. So that monkey mind that's always going on is kind of addicted and obsessed to the meditative experience. And he's kind of turned in on himself as his own guru. And so that's the way I kind of approach it. But that's a great question. Do you have any kind of a schedule to keep you on track, or do you have any other tips for motivation to get started?
You know, I've become more compassionate with myself in that it doesn't need to be perfect. First of all, it's just never going to happen. So, you know, I've done 20 minutes a day, like the transcendental meditation style, 20 minutes a day, twice a day, in the morning and then later in the afternoon, you know, consistently. But now when I'm functioning from a meditative place throughout the day and the night, I don't need to think that I have to have a certain schedule. I think it's good to have a schedule, but it's not necessary. You know, it's interesting because I feel like this is the most asked, or the most made comment about meditation, where people say, I don't have time. It's such an interesting thing how that's always kind of brought up. You know, so really if you have if you have the ability to recognize that you don't have time, then you certainly have the ability to make time, you know? So even just 5 minutes, just do 5 minutes. It's so funny. I was having a conversation with my brother about this, and he used to say, and we talked about it on his podcast recently. He used to say to people, just do 5 minutes. Just if you can just sit down for 5 minutes, forget about setting the scene. If you're in the middle of Times Square, if you're in the middle of a forest, if there's dogs barking, whatever the location is, it doesn't matter. And I would respond to him, you know, oh, come on, at least give them 20 minutes. At least give them, you know, that, you know, 5 minutes. What's that going to do? But 5 minutes can be profoundly impactful. Yeah. And if you don't have 5 minutes to sit and close your eyes, you have a deeper problem. I mean, there's a deeper problem going on, because I promise you have 5 minutes going on, or 5 minutes available to you. And in terms of, you know, Alan Watts, I love Alan Watts's suggestion for getting into meditation. Just purely listening. Just listen. Listening, yeah. Listening and breathing is the fastest way into the meditative state. You don't need a mantra. You don't need any of it. And also about, you know, you brought up the word judgment, Carl. I mean, that's a huge word. Don't judge it. Don't think, am I deep enough? Am I, you know, do I need to how do I close my eyes harder to get deeper? Just forget it. Those early meditations and even the later meditations are going to be so fraught and full of different stuff that it's okay. No matter, my meditation teacher talks about, no matter what the meditation is, you're evolving. No matter what it is, you know, well, the Dalai Lama, this person just said napping. The Dalai Lama talks about how napping is the greatest form of meditation. So take the nap. I mean, napping isn't exactly meditation, but that's cool, man. Take the nap.
I consider that a success. I'm trying to get a break from myself and from my day and my mind and what it's doing. And if I end up falling asleep and waking up, I'm like, wow, I went really deep with it.
Right, right.
But I think you're exactly right. I think you can, oftentimes you just kind of hit a wall, and that's when the best time to do it is. It's not necessarily when you've put a bunch of effort and thinking into the meditating. It can happen sort of spontaneously. Like I'll be sitting outside, just looking at my phone, and then uh, all sorts of natural cues will occur, like a hummingbird will zip by or stop for a second and leave. And I'll just let that moment be a cue to release that overthinking and that overjudging or whatever stories playing on in my mind. Is it's almost like all you can ever do is think about the past from where you're at right now and sit and ruminate on it, or sit and worry about the future from where you're at right now. And that conversation can build up like a static electricity in your mind, or this energetic state where it just feels like anxiety or overthinking and stress about just this story that's playing out in a language that you were taught when you were kids. And when you can drop the language, and I'll do these little tricks sometimes that, like your brother said, like it can just take a moment. And sometimes I'll sit there and I'll just cue my mind and think like I'm going to count from 0 to 1. And then I just never let the number 1 into the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as I feel like I'm experiencing that kind of Zen state, or that flow state of consciousness where I'm just witnessing reality in a totally serene and peaceful state, then immediately my mind goes, it's working, you're doing it, and starts to congratulate itself, or distractions will immediately come in. The kids will bang on the door, a dog will start barking, and you kind of have to make all of those different interruptions become part of your yoga and part of the experience of just like you trying to hold a position and the yoga of your life. And so every single thing, and sometimes I'll just go Om, and I'll just hum and create this vibrational sense in my skull and in my voice, and invoke my breathing in order to help that. So
well, that's the thing. If you're trying to set the scene, the scene is never going to be set perfectly. But part of the practice is just being with whatever the scene is. And that's the beautiful practice of meditation, because when we meditate, and I find it cool to like sit in meditations in different places.
right.
Because then you're just practicing the meditative state wherever you are. So that's beautiful. I do want to say one thing about the napping, though. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 8%. Meditating is 8% more rejuvenatory, I believe that's the word, than napping is. There's something about, like on a neurochemical and biochemical level, there's something about being in that kind of liminal zone where you're not fully asleep. When you're meditating, the bliss chemistry is able to be ignited for whatever reason. I'm sure there's reasons, but also like the practice of sitting in meditation as opposed to napping. Of course we could say napping could become a practice in a way, but being there with the mind while you're awake or in that liminal zone is a much different experience than falling asleep, as we know. I think it just needs to be noted that napping can be rejuvenative, can rejuvenate you, but it's not the same as meditation. And, for me, coming from trauma, coming from chaos, coming from, certain drug abuse, coming from relationship, challenges, et cetera, which I believe no human is immune to. When we meditate, we get back to balance. We get to find that union within our mind and our heart that we wouldn't otherwise be able to practice while we're asleep.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's a space there that I've experienced as well with meditation. I've done Bob Monroe's Gateway program and William Buhlman's Out of Body Experience program and completed those courses. And I've discovered through doing that and other types of meditation, like the Kala Chakra initiation meditations and different things, I have, you kind of discover that there's altered states of consciousness that you can enter or that you can become aware of that are different. We're so used to day to day just waking up and having your waking reality with your mind running over time, analyzing and trying to solve everything and seeking for answers and trying to fill in all the gaps and solve all the problems. And then we crash at the end of the day and hope to sleep and hope to release and get a break from all that. And maybe sometimes we enter a dreamscape where we have like a dream experience, but we don't really identify with those dreams either. And we just wake up and repeat that cycle like mindless to the whole experience. But when you get into the different levels of consciousness and meditation, there's these zones and layers in between where you go into this deep, relaxed state of mind and emotional state of being, or maybe do a sound bath meditation with the crystal bowls or auditory assistance or anything like that. And you kind of can fall into this space where you're in a visual realm that's open or different than normal reality. That's not a dream, but you're completely lucid and aware. And it feels like it's beyond just physical reality or the dreamscape, where you can actually, like, for example, in the Monroe Institute Gateway program, you kind of create these environments inside your visual space that you can meditate and go into. And I have like what I call an energy conversion box in there. So I'll go into like an imaginary room, everything that I'm struggling with, even my thoughts, I'll open this kind of mystical, magical box that's full of God's energy or this powerful infinite energy. And I'll put all my problems, visualize putting them all in there, and I'll close the lid, and it sort of purifies everything for me. Or I'll even crawl inside the box myself and let it cleanse me. And you can also create different imaginary, like a room that you go into just to sit and meditate, even within yourself, to have layers and layers of peace and serenity. And that brings up another good question. I have another co-host here I wanted to bring in here in a minute. Michael from the Singularity Lab just appeared down in there. We'll pop in here with him to bring in some questions as well. But I wanted to ask you, Augustus, if you've in deep meditation, because I've had some very powerful experiences where I've found myself sort of standing in a realm, like a visionary place, that I wasn't necessarily imagining. I just discover myself standing in this visual forest or garden, and my father who's passed away, or some sort of a being or entity will appear, and there will be sort of a communication or a message conveyed or interaction, or I'll get carried away into these magical places. Or have you had any sort of out-of-body experiences or encounters or mystical experiences while meditating beyond just the basic beginner practices that I think people could be really interested in?
Right. I mean, I feel like life is just a constant mystical experience of just bizarre, one thing after another. Something I will say about that is the more I've meditated, the more I would, whether I want to say it's from meditating, the more mindful I get, the more I practice the witness, the more I practice functioning out of my intuitive heart, the more I get closer to the still small voice inside me, the more I strengthen my sense of self. These things called coincidences that or synchronicities, or what people might call weird or crazy, those things happen to me all the time.
Right.
Where I'll say something and then I'll go outside and it'll be in front of me. Or I'll say something and then I'll meet somebody and they'll have just read it. Something like that. So for me, and I think the easy answer to that is, oh, you're right on time. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. So, and that to me is a mystical experience coming from the more mundane, material, concretized existence, where those things aren't supposed to happen, or if they do, we just label it weird, as opposed to the truth of the matter, where we're all connected on this kind of third eye level, which is just like the intuition. And then it's just constantly unfolding, I mean, I've had deep experiences in my meditation, but see, also on that, Carl, I think there's a little bit of a slippery slope where we start practicing meditation and we just make it about that, where we just want to have the mystical experience, as opposed to if the mystical experience comes, that's awesome. If the meditation is just sort of a disaster where it's just thought after thought after thought, that's awesome too. It's all evolution with inside me and more information to where I'm at right now. So
yeah, and it's kind of the paying attention to that for the first time and noticing it from a different perspective and position is the key. It's not necessarily what's going on in the forefront, on the front of the screen. I want to take a second and bring Michael in here to the stream. Michael's from the Singularity Lab. He discusses a lot of profound topics on his YouTube channel, from the UFO UAP phenomenon to singularity. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do, Michael, and introduce yourself?
Oh my gosh. First of all, thank you for having me, Carl, and great to meet you, Augustus. It was so funny. I was listening to you guys previously, and I had the opportunity of interviewing your brother a little while back, and I'm listening to you and I'm going, oh my God, like y'all's voices are so similar. I was like, oh my God. But wonderful to meet you, Augustus. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you guys. So what I do over at the Singularity Lab is we really look at breaking technology, breaking science, breaking research into the brain. We really look deeply into quantum physics and try to figure out, now that human beings are in this kind of weird mesh of philosophy, entrenched in technological growth, how do we make sense of it? So many people in this world are depressed in this modern world, and it's a world that we weren't built for, and our brains aren't evolving quite as fast as our world is. So I really appreciate the conversation about how you center yourself, how you bring it back to a place of peace and center, so you can actually move in this world in a way that's productive and makes you happy, and creates a vibe, as you would say, Carl.
Yeah, I'd be curious. What do you guys think about this Neuralink thing on the brain,
dude?
Carl, you have a big image of a floating brain on your intro, and you just brought the neurological aspect, Michael. I could say a lot about what the ramifications of what Neuralink could do for us, but I'm curious what your guys' thoughts on it are.
Michael, go ahead. This is
okay.
your
thing.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of interviewing a gentleman, Ryan Tanaka, a couple weeks ago, and he has a podcast called the Neuropod, and he basically just tracks what's going on with Neuralink. And it's fascinating. It has, the opportunity that Neuralink has to take somebody who's quadriplegic and allow their brain to communicate with the lower half of their body so that they can walk again. That's very real, and it's very close. My concern comes in as we start to develop AI and quantum computing, and we start to have our brains hooked up to these extraordinary technological systems. What do we become? Are we still human? Are we transhuman? Are we something new entirely? And how does that fit into our past, our present, and our future? And so I find Neuralink to be fascinating. I think there's huge potential an opportunity here, but I'm also, the reason I started the Singularity Lab, because I wanted to talk about the ethics of these things and how we move into the process of becoming cyborgs without losing our humanity.
I agree. I think I worry, just like I mentioned earlier, about the billboards and the advertising. You go to Times Square and it's just nothing but marketing and advertising. And what kind of terrifies me about the Neuralink technology is even now, all these apps and websites that we use and integrate into our day-to-day life are infiltrated with reading our personality, listening to what we're doing, and monitoring our behavior, and then trying to feed back in a loop an overlay of marketing and product sales, and trying to push you in a direction to make your life about that product and identify with it. And what concerns me is the how that could get integrated into the experience. Like, in order to get a more affordable Neuralink connection, you have to have the money or the connection, or be able to pay your bills. And if that goes down, then are you going to get augmented reality pop-up ads in your experience of the user interface day to day of your waking reality? And is that going to infiltrate your dreams and subconscious, where it's injecting these messages into you and overlaying your reality in an unnatural way? But then at the same time, as we create these things, I can see the benefits for people like my father that struggled with dementia, being able to reconnect. We walk around day to day with people that have pacemakers that help keep them alive, and people who are in accidents and paralyzed, and that could help them. And so, or epilepsy, for example. So it's kind of a paradox and a mixed bag for me. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts, Augustus, on that.
Michael brought up my concern, the ethics of it. Technology is cool. I'm not somebody that's anti-technology by any means. I mean, we're capable of doing this whole fascinating, profound thing right now because of technology. But, the ethics, I've been playing with this thing of technology council for a while. Why is there no entity in our public? I know somebody that works for the WHO, and they responded to me and said, oh, well, we have I believe it's the WTO, like the World Trade Organization, which tracks different technological and cultural developments. But I don't feel like that's really doing what we're doing, or doing, what I'm considering, why is there no cultural communication as to whether or not we want to implement a certain technology on a mass scale? And as of now, we are separate from the technology. We were talking about the dual and the non-dual aspect. Thank God, so to speak, if you will. We still have a dual experience with technology. But what is that? Also, these technologies, Michael and Carl, have been, I was never asked if I wanted a new iPhone. This was really just given to me. These things are just put in front of us. So ethically, something like Neuralink comes along, which is literally changing us, on so many different levels, and could potentially be entering our bodies. Could this be another situation where this technology is implemented? We have no real say about whether or not we want it. And then suddenly, 30 years down the line, we have a chip in our brain. Right as of now, the iPhone, which is essentially God, information-wise, is separate from us. What happens if that's inside us? I mean, this is an interesting question. Could we reach the meditative state through Neuralink? Well, why would you want to reach the meditative state? You'd already have everything. I mean, what would matter at that point? So I think the ethics of it, that's just the crux of that should be the essence of any technology moving forward. How is this ethically going to impact us? But like you said, like Carl said, treating dementia, people being able to walk, but will it just stop there? That feels very altruistic and beautiful to me, but is it going to stop there?
Not if it's being driven by capitalism and pure profit focus, right? I mean, this is the problem that we have even with even with social media, right? Because they give it to you for free, but then you become the product. And so when you think of things like Neuralink, it's going to be expensive at first. It's going to be only for folks who are rich, but then somebody's going to come in as a CMO or a CEO and say, well, why can't we just give these things away for free and then charge for advertising? Yes. And that's my fear, because you've got, millions of kids who are gamers, right? And they're going to be chomping at the bit to get their hands on this transcendental video game biological technological implant, and they're going to be willing to get that for free in exchange for this advertising being plugged right into their brain. So that's the Black Mirror episode that I'm afraid of.
Right. And we talked about that on the Unidentified Celebrity Review channel just yesterday, where we discussed the society and this technology is moving forward like an icebreaker ship going through the ice, plowing ahead and trying to avoid hitting icebergs along the way with this big mission statement of accomplishment that it wants to achieve. And you have to wonder not only who's going to be able to afford and have access to the beneficial aspects of this technology that's coming out, but how many people are being left behind in the wake that still don't even have running water, don't have even electricity, let alone even a smartphone yet. And then here comes Neuralink, where people are actually cognitively integrating with technology, and there's people still using flip phones. And it's something that you also have to think about, not just on our own generation, but our grandchildren or their children will grow up and be raised in a world just like now we're given these identities right from birth, and you're told this is who you are and everything, and you try to live according to that. Well, they're going to grow up just with the assumption that Neuralink is a part of life, and that when they're old enough, when they turn 16, just like a driver's license, and they get to go get their chip, or their parent, or their parents put one in them as a baby, as a designer baby in order to track them. And then is mom and dad going to be able to see exactly where you are, like your whole life, and see what you're doing? And it's a very fascinating topic where we're on the brink of this technological innovation and the software. And I don't think that we really know enough about consciousness and the nature of reality or the way that we're viewing it in order to integrate these things just directly into us as and harness them into our consciousness. So it's a very slippery slope. It brings up a really good question.
Yeah, I just saw that recent thing about they were going to consider doing an Instagram for kids that seemed like it got vetoed, which I was really grateful for. But I mean, children and young adults, teenagers, I mean, that's such a powerful aspect of it, because I mean, that's just amazing how the children are it's almost like we're all living in different paradigms of technology depending on how old we are. And it's like the future technology doesn't make sense for this age group, but the younger technology that's growing up closer to it is more willing to participate in it, even if that older generation thinks it's totally outlandish and absurd and dangerous. So that's.
So are you going to go get Neuralink, Michael?
I am not. It's funny. I spoke to a genomics expert recently about the COVID vaccine, and I'm just like, I need to get out in the world. I need the vaccine. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm just going to do it. And she was like, yeah, I waited till there were 5 million doses administered. I was like, the scientist waited till there were 5 million doses administered? Shit, I need to rethink my approach here. So I will probably wait till there are quite a few folks who have Neuralinks before I make a decision on that. But again, there are things that I think it's fascinating and amazing potentially for. But going back to this idea of one of the reasons that Elon Musk has been warning everyone about AI for a very long time. You brought up, Augustus, recently the iPhone in your pocket, how it's like a god. Like, we have cyborg powers because of this thing. I can't access any bit of information I want in any given moment because of this. If I leave the house without it, I feel like I left my arm at home. So it's pretty already almost there. And so when it's actually in the brain, when we actually have it connected to ourselves, what is that going to create? What sort of world are we going to create? And so this idea of super intelligent AI potentially turning on us, the part of the philosophy and the mission statement behind Neuralink is, if you can't beat them, join them. It's connect with the super intelligence. And so that's what we call transhumanism. That's what we call the singularity. And so the question is, how do we prepare ourselves? You know, I'm not sure we can stop it. Kevin said here, we know LSD, psilocybin break down the brain regulation. As a result, we realize sensory inputs that are normally suppressed. So a psychedelic experience turns off my default mode network in my brain, that thing that you were talking about earlier, Carl, that just makes you go, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that. Well, that shuts down, and then I have access to everything in my brain, and it can be an enlightening experience, and you can gather new data that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so I had one of those experiences in the last 6 months, and that experience brought the idea to me that there is no stopping this thing. The question is, what role are you going to play in laying the groundwork so that we don't lose our humanity in the process?
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's going to become more and more important as individuals, or that there are people like maybe us and Augustus, so that kind of adopt these modern day roles as a yogi or guru that kind of look back to these ancient primitive methods that transcend the technology, whether it be through the psilocybin or different medicines or different herbs and things like that, but even just the ancient mindsets, teachings, and practices that we can basically invoke in our life to bring it back to the beginning and make sure that the technology as it moves forward is kind of ethically kept in check with this overarching nature of the soul and the human experience.
Well, I mean, somebody that I listen, that's inspired me quite a bit, of course, Terence Mckenna, and he was consistently bringing up the archaic revival. How do we? That was his phrase. So there's something to be said. There's something ineffable to me to be said about living naturally, and like in the future. Like, I totally hear what you're saying, Michael, about, get on the bus or you're going to get left behind. I mean, we can see that with iPhones. Like, how can you participate in this world if you, like, email is on the iPhone? There's so much different publicity opportunities on the iPhone. Work comes through the iPhone. I mean, you have to really be off the grid, so to speak, to not participate in this stuff. So maybe how do we embrace it without losing our naturality or our humanity moving forward? And that's why I think deeper conversations need to be had in the greater milieu of people as to whether or not we want to incorporate this thing into our lives, which I don't feel like has been there's no
discourse.
Yes, between the corporations creating these items and the people that are using them.
100%.
That's a problem. That's a huge problem, and that could get a lot crazier going forward.
And that wave is already going clear downstream and crashing against the shore, to the point where even people like us, and even having the conversation, trying to present these ideas and having this discussion, you can't just do it up in the mountains in a cave in isolation and hope that people spiritually wander up there anymore. The world is moving so fast that now you have to integrate the technology even into the guru and mystical experience, like we are even today trying to have this discussion right now. We're harnessing all this modern technology. We're using Google, we're using YouTube, all this software and everything, and integrating it into the modern experience of trying to share and hold on to these ancient teachings. And I kind of wanted to bring the conversation back full circle, then if that's the case, then let's maybe discuss that for a moment. What are you drawn to, Augustus and Michael, as far as when you look to the past? Is it Buddhism? Is it Hinduism? Is it non-duality teachings? Is there any particular philosophy or ancient practice or teaching that you feel really should emerge forward, or that is something that you're drawn to in your meditative practices?
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was just going to say the Amazing Spider-Man is right here. With great power comes great responsibility, right? No, for me, it's Taoism. I'm very interested in the flow, right? And it's this idea that religion can be very dogmatic and unchangeable, whereas Taoism is in constant flow. It's in constant change. It's understanding the natural rhythms of nature and emulating those and following the path of least resistance that creates the most value for the greatest amount of living creatures. And so that's what I try to fall back to when it's not Spider-Man, it's the Tao Te Ching.
I got to correct you there, by the way. If you go a little bit earlier, the movie Teen Wolf, Michael J. Fox's dad says that to him right before he plays basketball. With great power.
Oh, really?
Yeah, great power. I was watching on TV, old retro, and it blew my mind. I was like, they totally took that from Teen Wolf. I had no idea.
Actually, I'm pretty sure Stan Lee came up with that before. I think Teen Wolf jacked it from Stan Lee, but we can debate that later. We've got a supercomputer that can tell us right now.
Yeah.
That's true. What do you think, Augustus? So Taoism, that's definitely something that I read a lot about as well, and the Wu Wei, being in that middle, in the flow state, like they talk about. What about you, Augustus?
I mean, I'm into all of it. One of my favorite quotes from the Tao is truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. I love that.
That's great.
Man, I'm just into all of it. I'm so not like I'm here for this and not that. Like, if you have some information to give me to blossom, I'm here for it. I don't care what religion it's from. I don't care what spiritual practice it's from. It doesn't matter. But I want to say it's no accident to me that with as much technology as we have, we are now almost like that Kybalion thing, the pendulum swings. Like, with as much technology as we have, we are also developing as much spirituality. Like, there's no accident that cannabis is so relevant and has become legal now. And it's no accident that mushrooms are probably going to be legal very soon. It's no accident that LSD is probably going to be legal very soon, or that yoga is so relevant, because we need it. We need it. And I think there's so many opportunities to blend the technological aspects of living with the spiritual aspects of living. And I believe people need it. People are wanting, to balance the scales with as much tech stuff going on in their lives with the more meditative aspects. I mean, what do you think
agree
about that, Michael?
Dude, like 100%. Like, thank you. And I appreciate the fact that you're out here talking to as many people in that realm, because we need it. We need to be more at peace, because again, the amount of depression, the amount of mental illness that we see in this world is just horrifying. And so when I see Johns Hopkins University coming 35 years after the war on drugs and starting to use psilocybin again to help people be able to rediscover their connection with the eternal, that I'm going, yes, finally, here we go. Because you look at like LSD, for example. LSD was what led us to develop SSRI drugs. Like, depression drugs were invented because LSD taught us what mechanisms were at work in the brain. And so what happened with those SSRI drugs? We told people, just take one pill a day and it'll fix you. Bullshit.
Right.
Bullshit.
Right.
Some people maybe, like I'm not a doctor. Some people these drugs are very helpful for, but having read Chasing the Scream, amazing book about depression and connection. You look at the rat experiment and how when you give cocaine to rats in a horrible environment, they'll just take till the point of killing themselves. When you give them luxurious, they can fuck all they want, they can eat all they want, they can play all they want, they don't use the cocaine, right? So we know environment and connection is the most important thing, yet we live in this world where we don't have it. So like psilocybin can give people a connection to that eternal that they haven't had before, and it just takes one dose. One dose.
Right. I agree with that. And also, not only that, I think we're going to see this loop in technology as well, where we're so used to the analog controls where you have the phone in your pocket and buttons to push and things to interact with. But as this technology comes forward, or Neuralink comes forward, it might become a necessity to understand mindfulness and meditation to even control conscious controlled technology. And there might be something to where, in order to change what web page you want to look at in your mind, you have to understand these ancient teachings of meditation and have this deep level of understanding within yourself to control your thoughts and emotions, or you're going to end up on the deep web just looking at porn all day. You know what I mean? If you don't control your mind and consciousness, where are you going to end up with that technology? And also, nature has this way in the universe of balancing itself out in phenomenal and sometimes horrifying ways, where this ancient ways and teachings of mindfulness could return with a simple meteorite impact or a solar flare that EMPs us and wipes a lot of this technology out and forces society to go back to these ancient ways and return to a heart-centered compassion and neighborhood and community mindset. And all of this technology can just get stripped away like ripping a Band-Aid off. And I know that we've got to wrap this up soon, but I just wanted to hear you guys' final thoughts on meditation or yoga, and any last words that you guys wanted to share with our audience before we go.
One quick one before I go. I wanted to hit on what you guys were saying about technology and ethics, and Augustus, you brought up a really great point. There's no organization that's having these conversations about the ethics of technology. And Nick Bostrom, a Swedish-born philosopher and physicist, wrote a really interesting paper called The Vulnerable Earth hypothesis, which ultimately is pointing to all of the ways we can, if technology is left unfettered, destroy our civilization. And this leads us back to the conversation we had yesterday on the Singularity Lab about the Great Filter. Is it possible that we are really close to exterminating ourselves? And if we don't get a handle on the ethics of technology, and create the conversation, we don't know what's going to happen. So I completely agree with you, Augustus. We need that. We need those conversations and those boards to have them.
Yeah. And just for me, piggybacking off of that, how do we become capable of having those conversations? I think we can't expect people that aren't empathetic to be able to have those conversations. And to me, my belief, in order to become empathetic enough to be able to hear all the different points, all the different views, I want Neuralink, I don't want Neuralink, without saying you're wrong and I'm right, my belief is meditating, whatever that looks like to you, whether you sit down, repeat a mantra, go for a walk, whatever your meditative practice is, or your spiritual practice, whether it's the Tao or the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, whatever it is, getting closer to the truth, the empathetic truth, to where we can hear all the voices at play without judging, without approaching it from it's us and them as opposed to we. So whatever I'm practicing where it can become we, because if it's not we, it's never going to work. We're never going to be able to hear each other. And that's just, I believe, an aspect of why the deterioration of culture can happen, is if it's us versus them. I mean, we live in this absurd situation politically where there's literally a red and a blue team. Why are we under this paradigm? It's ridiculous to me. You know, how do we come together? I know this is it's Beatles and it's cliche and 70s. I mean, we're still trying to figure it out. But maybe, like we've been saying, the knowledge is becoming more available, which is also a part of the double-edged sword of technology. We have this knowledge available now. So now what do we decide to do with it in order to come together and be able to communicate in a healthy way?
Well said.
Well said. Yeah, I appreciate both of you guys coming on the show today, sharing your thoughts, and thank you for correcting me, Michael, about that show was on your channel on the Singularity Lab, where we talked about moving forward on the ship and leaving.
Oh, that's right.
behind.
It was yesterday.
That was
the
yesterday.
live streams blend together, bro.
They do. And I think what we're all doing and trying to do, whether it be with where we're headed into future technology over on the Singularity Lab, or if you're delving into Augustus Britton's writings and books and his newsletter and subscribing to that, getting involved in these types of shows and trying to step outside of your normal day-to-day rat race that you experience, that society just throws you in and you run on that hamster wheel, is to try and step out of that, change your mind, meditate, and you'll realize very quickly that we're all one and we're all connected in that non-dual sense, and need to face these issues and address these issues not only as a society and people, but within ourselves and within our souls and a consciousness moving forward, whether that be with the Neuralink implanted or whether you're going to stay primitive and try to stay outside of that. So I want to thank you guys for joining up today, and make sure and check out the links down in the description below where everybody was at. Any final words, guys?
Hey, man, thank you for having me on. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Carl, for having me. Augustus, great to meet you, man. Yeah, if you guys want to follow the Singularity Lab, just pop over on YouTube, the Singularity Lab, and then you can find me on Twitter at Singularity Mike. But again, we need to have these conversations, both from a humanity perspective of, you know, how are we going to get to the point where we can actually have these conversations so that we get past the us versus them. And I know it's cliche, and you brought that up, Augustus, like everyone, like we've been talking about this since the 60s, and where has it gotten us? And I think it's gotten us to, I mean, we're talking about it now, right? We're talking about it in 2021. So good on you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. We got to keep that conversation going. And yeah, check out Singularity Mike over on the Singularity Lab and all over the place. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining us. So Augustus, where can everybody find you on the internet and continue to follow your yogi journey?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is my newsletter. That's the thing I'm most excited and passionate about. It's called Reality Now. So if you go to realitynow.substack.com, you can subscribe for free, or there's different tiers. There's like a $5 a month or a $40 for the year. I'm totally cool with subscribing for free. I'm just building a community with my writing on there. So that's the main thing. Awesome.
Yeah, check out Augustus. Everybody, thank you guys for joining the show, and thank you guys for joining and your great comments and everything participating. This was our first live stream over here on Carl Vibe, Augustus Britton. Check him out down in the links below and online everywhere, and we'll see you guys in the next one.